Daniel could hear the sound of boots echoing in the vast metallic corridor. His wrists were bound with glowing cuffs that burned into his skin, reminding him that he was a prisoner of the Everythi Empire. Two towering alien guards dragged him forward, their sharp claws digging into his arms as if to remind him of his weakness. He tried not to stumble, but every step was heavy. The weight of defeat pressed against his chest more than the cuffs themselves. Finally, the doors ahead hissed open, and the guards pushed him inside. The chamber he entered was enormous, its walls glittering with strange lights and alien symbols. At the far end, upon a throne of black stone and silver veins, sat the one he had heard about in whispers, the alien queen. She was taller than any soldier he had seen, her body covered in armor-like scales that shimmered with deep violet and black. Her crown was not made of metal but bone, curling upward like horns. Her eyes glowed like molten fire, burning into him as though they could see through his soul. Every guard bowed their heads as they passed her, but Daniel did not. He stood battered but straight, forcing his legs not to shake. The queen leaned forward. Her voice rolled through the chamber like thunder, heavy with power and command. "Human," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "You dare to look at me as if you are my equal?" Daniel did not answer. He could feel dozens of alien eyes on him, waiting for him to break. The silence stretched until the queen's lips curled into something between a snarl and a smile. "Do you not fear me?" she asked. He swallowed, his throat dry. "I fear war," he said softly. "Not you." A sharp laugh burst from one of the guards, but the queen silenced him with a single glance. She rose from her throne and descended the steps, each movement graceful yet heavy with danger. She stopped before Daniel, close enough that he could see the faint patterns along her scales, like scars carved from battles long past. She studied him in silence, her burning eyes locking with his. Then she leaned down, her voice lowering to a whisper that was more dangerous than her shout. "Touch me again, human, and you'll regret it." The words echoed in his ears. The guards chuckled, convinced their queen was simply toying with her prey. To them, the human was fragile, pathetic, nothing worth fearing. But Daniel noticed something different. Her warning was not spoken to amuse her court. It was real. She meant it, but why? He remembered the moment before his capture, how in the chaos of battle he had been thrown against her path, his hand brushing against her arm. For an instant he had touched her, skin to skin. She had not killed him then, though she easily could have. Instead, she had ordered him taken alive now. Here she was, standing before him, reminding him of that touch as though it carried weight far beyond what anyone else could understand. Daniel did not lower his gaze. He did not tremble like the others expected. Instead, he searched her burning eyes, and for the briefest moment, he thought he saw something hidden there. Not hatred, not anger, something else. Pain. The queen straightened, her voice rising again, louder now so that all could hear. "You are mine now, human. My prisoner. Speak when spoken to. Obey, or you will die." Daniel clenched his fists inside the cuffs. His body ached, but his spirit did not bend. He could not explain why, but he felt this meeting was more than fate. It was the beginning of something larger, something that could change everything. The guards dragged him back, but Daniel's eyes lingered on hers until the last second before the doors closed. The queen stood motionless on her throne, yet her mind was not at rest. Her warning echoed inside her as much as it did in him. "Touch me again, human, and you'll regret it." But in her heart, she wondered if the regret would truly be his or hers. The days passed slowly inside the cold walls of the alien cell. Daniel sat on the hard floor, his back against the strange metal that pulsed with faint light. There was no window, no sense of time, only the constant hum of the ship's engines reminding him that he was far from Earth. His body healed slowly from the battle, but his mind stayed sharp. Every few hours, guards came to check on him. They never spoke, only sneered or hissed in their guttural language. To them, he was just another fragile human, a defeated soldier waiting for execution. But Daniel felt something deeper was happening. He remembered the queen's words echoing in his head like a shadow. "Touch me again, human, and you'll regret it." Why had she spared him? Why had she warned him instead of killing him the moment his hand brushed against her in battle? The question stayed with him, haunting him as much as the silence of the cell. One evening, the doors opened with a hiss, and she entered. The alien queen. Her presence filled the room the way a storm fills the sky, heavy, powerful, impossible to ignore. The guard stood back as she walked in, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Daniel rose slowly to his feet, refusing to kneel. His wrists were still bound by glowing cuffs, but his posture was steady. "You humans are stubborn," she said, her voice cold and sharp. "Even broken, you pretend to be unbroken." Daniel gave a small smile. "Maybe we are not pretending." Her eyes narrowed. She circled him slowly, her gaze never leaving him. "You think courage will save you? It will not. Obedience saves. Fear saves. You have neither." "I have choice," Daniel replied. "That is enough." For a moment, the queen stopped walking. Something flickered across her face, so fast it was almost hidden. But Daniel noticed it. The brief hesitation, the faint shadow in her fire-like eyes. She stepped closer, her tall frame towering over him. The air between them grew tense, as if the walls themselves held their breath. She reached out, not to strike, but to lift his chin with one clawed finger, forcing him to look at her. "Listen well, human," she whispered, her voice low but dangerous. "If you dare touch me again, if you even think of it, you will regret it. I will break your bones one by one. I will make you beg for mercy you will never receive." The words were venom, but Daniel heard something else buried deep in them: fear. Not fear of him, but fear of what that touch had meant. His lips curled into the faintest smile. "Then why are you here warning me instead of ending me?" Her eyes flashed. She withdrew her hand as if burned, turning her back to him. The guard shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should act. Silence stretched heavy and sharp. Finally, the queen spoke, her tone steadier now. "Do not mistake my patience for weakness. You are alive only because I allow it. Remember that." Daniel's voice softened. "I don't mistake it for weakness. I think it takes strength to allow something you fear." The words hit her like a hidden blade. She spun, her face twisting in anger, yet her eyes betrayed something else: confusion, maybe even pain. For a moment she seemed less like a monster and more like someone carrying a burden too heavy to share. But the mask returned quickly. She signaled to the guards, her voice cold once more. "Take him back. He is not worth my time." The guards moved, but Daniel's gaze never left hers. He saw the smallest crack in her armor, the faint tremor in her hand as she turned away. She was trying to convince herself as much as him. As the doors closed, Daniel leaned against the wall of his cell, his mind racing. She hated him, yes. She threatened him, yes. But she kept coming back. She kept warning him instead of destroying him, and deep inside he understood something dangerous. Her warning was not about his touch. It was about her fear of what that touch awakened. "Touch me again, human, and you'll regret it." But Daniel knew. The regret would not be his. The silence of the cell was broken again a few days later. Daniel had learned that time felt endless in this place, but every visit from the queen shattered that endlessness. She arrived as she always did, guards at her side, her presence filling the room like a storm. But this time her voice was not filled with anger. It was steady, colder than ice, yet softer than he expected. "You humans," she began, "fight as though death is nothing. You throw yourselves into fire even when there is no hope." Daniel tilted his head, watching her carefully. "Is that what you think of us?" "It is what I know," she answered, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "My warriors see it as foolishness. To die for a hopeless cause is weakness. But you—" She paused, her jaw tightening. "You confuse me." Daniel gave a small laugh, though his throat was dry. "Maybe that's because you've never seen what we fight for. We don't run because we're brave. We don't fight because we're strong. We do it because someone we love is always behind us. We fight for them, not for ourselves." The queen's eyes flickered at the word love. Her claws twitched slightly against her armored palm. "Love," she repeated, almost like the word itself was dangerous. "A weakness. A chain that binds. A chain that saves," Daniel corrected gently. The chamber grew quiet. The guards shifted but said nothing. The queen's gaze lingered on Daniel as if she was searching for something she couldn't name. Then, without warning, she stepped closer. Her shadow stretched across him, and Daniel felt the heat of her presence. Her scaled chest rose and fell slowly. Her eyes locked on his. "Do you know why I despise your kind, human?" she asked, her voice trembling just enough for him to notice. Daniel shook his head. "Because you endure," she whispered. "You lose everything, yet you still rise. You bleed, yet you still fight. And worse, you carry hope even in chains. My people, We have forgotten what hope feels like. Her words struck Daniel deeper than any threat. He saw something raw in her eyes, something no one else was allowed to see. It was not hatred. It was loneliness. Daniel took a careful breath. Maybe that's why you envy us. Her expression hardened instantly, but not before he saw the truth flicker there. Anger covered what sorrow had revealed. She snapped her head away, her voice sharp again. Do not speak as though you know me. You are nothing but a prisoner. But Daniel wasn't afraid of her tone anymore. He looked at her steadily and spoke softly. I think you don't hate humans. I think you hate yourself for wanting what we have. Her body froze. The chamber felt heavy, the guards uneasy at the tension between them. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The queen's hand lifted as if to strike him, but she stopped halfway, her claws trembling in the air. Her breathing grew uneven, her jaw clenched. Slowly, she lowered her hand and turned her face away, hiding whatever had broken through her armor. Daniel saw it, the crack in the mask she always wore. The truth that even a queen feared. For the first time, she did not threaten him. She did not remind him of his place. Instead, she simply stood in silence, her shoulders heavier than before. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, almost human. You are a fool, human, and yet, your words stay with me. Daniel's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. Maybe they stay because you know they're true. Her eyes flashed once more, filled with conflict. Then, without another word, she turned sharply and left the chamber. The doors closed behind her, leaving Daniel in the heavy silence of his cell. But this silence felt different. It was not emptiness. It was the beginning of something dangerous, something powerful. The queen was breaking, and Daniel knew it. The war outside raged on. Daniel could not see it from his cell, but he heard the whispers from the guards. Entire fleets burned. Cities fell into dust. The Everythi Empire, once unshakable, was beginning to feel the weight of the endless struggle against humanity. But inside the great ship, a different battle was happening. A battle no one else could see. It was a battle inside the alien queen herself. The council of the Everythi had grown restless. They spoke behind her back, their voices dripping with anger and suspicion. Why was the human still alive? Why had she spared him when execution would have been easier? To them, Daniel was nothing but a threat, a crack in the wall of their power. One night, Daniel was dragged from his cell and taken to the council chamber. The air was thick with tension. The queen sat upon her throne, her expression unreadable, while her counselors surrounded her like hungry wolves. This human must die, one of them hissed, his scales bristling with fury. His defiance spreads like poison. The guards whisper of him. The soldiers wonder why he is kept alive. He is a danger to your rule. Another counselor slammed his staff on the ground. Execute him, my queen, and show your strength. Show that the empire does not hesitate. The chamber filled with their voices, sharp and accusing. Daniel stood silent in the center, his hands still bound, his eyes steady. He looked not at the council but at her, the queen. Her gaze was fixed on him, and though her face was calm, he could see the storm behind her eyes. Finally, she raised her hand, silencing the council. Her voice was firm, but there was a tremor hidden within it. No, he lives. The council erupted in protest. Some shouted, some begged, some threatened. But she stood tall, her presence silencing them once more. This human is not weakness, he is mine. His life or death is my choice, and mine alone. Daniel felt his chest tighten. She had defended him, but the danger in her words was clear. By protecting him, she was risking her throne, her power, maybe even her life. When the meeting ended, the guards dragged him back to the cell. But later that night, the queen came to him herself. No guards, no council, just her. She entered the cell quietly, her tall figure shadowing the dim light. Daniel stood as she approached, his heart beating fast. You are a problem, human, she said softly, though her voice lacked the sharpness it once carried. The council wants you dead. They see you as a threat. And what do you see me as? Daniel asked, her eyes glowed faintly. For a long moment, she did not answer. Then she whispered, danger, but not for the reasons they think. Daniel stepped closer, though the cuffs on his wrists clinked with every movement. Then why keep me alive? Why risk your rule? Her jaw tightened. She turned her face away, but her words betrayed her heart. Because you remind me of something I thought was lost. You remind me that I am more than a crown, more than a weapon. Silence filled the cell. The weight of her confession pressed against Daniel's chest. He knew this was the crack he had seen before, breaking wider. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his hand. The warning still echoed in his memory. Touch me again, human, and you'll regret it. But this moment was different. He was not reaching out to defy her. He was reaching out to choose. The queen's eyes widened as his hand hovered near her arm. Her body tensed, torn between fury and fear, but she did not move away. If you do this, she whispered, her voice trembling, everything will change. I will have no choice but to end you, or to betray everything I am. Daniel's voice was steady. Then maybe it's time for something to change. His hand inched closer, the silence of the cell deafening. The choice hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. A moment that would decide not just his fate but hers. And for the first time in her long reign, the alien queen did not know if she wanted to stop him. The cell was quiet, quieter than it had ever been. The hum of the ship's engines faded into the background as Daniel stood facing the alien queen. For a long moment, neither moved. Her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, were fixed on his, burning with warning, fear, and something he could not yet name. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice low, almost breaking. One touch and I know, Daniel interrupted softly. And I'm ready. The words hung in the air, heavy with danger. The queen's body stiffened. The guards had been dismissed for this meeting. Yet the sense of power in the room made Daniel feel as if thousands were watching. He lifted his hand slowly, each movement deliberate, careful not to strike or startle her. Her gaze narrowed, her lips parting slightly. The air between them seemed to shimmer. The moment felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall could destroy everything. Yet Daniel stepped closer, reaching for her armored arm. The first brush of his fingers sent a shock through the queen. She stiffened as though he had struck her with fire. Every muscle in her body tensed, but she did not strike him down. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, wide and unblinking. For the first time, she allowed him near. His hand lingered, tracing the edge of her armor where the scales met the flesh beneath. She flinched once, then froze, her chest rising and falling rapidly. No one had ever touched her like this. No one had dared. And now the human who was supposed to be her enemy was defying her fear. Do you feel it? Daniel asked quietly, his voice gentle. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because I choose to, her lips parted. A faint noise escaped her throat, something between a gasp and a whisper. Her claws twitched, but she did not strike. She did not pull away. She was still, as if trying to fight the reality that her own heart, her own mind was betraying her orders, her empire, her identity. Daniel could feel the tension radiating from her, the centuries of command and power, the loneliness of a ruler who had never been touched without fear. And now that loneliness was melting under the simplest gesture, a human hand resting against her. I cannot, she whispered, her voice trembling. You are dangerous. One touch. I know, Daniel said. But so are you. And sometimes the strongest are the ones who let themselves feel. Her eyes softened slightly, the glow dimming. A tear, silver and faint, formed at the edge of her eye. It slid down her cheek, leaving a trail across the dark scales. For the first time in her long life, she was not a queen. She was just herself, exposed, fragile, and human in ways no one else would ever see. The world outside the cell, the war, the empire, they all faded away. There was only this moment. The human standing in front of her, reaching out not with fear, not with violence, but with courage and care. She could strike him. She could end it all. She could reclaim the walls around her heart and never look back. But she did not. Instead, she let her hand brush against his, a subtle contact, a spark that said more than words ever could. Daniel's grip was steady, comforting, and gentle. She closed her eyes for a brief second, tasting what it was to trust, to feel, to allow something human to enter her world. The air in the cell shifted. The queen's body relaxed slightly, her scales softening under the warmth of the touch. For the first time in centuries, she allowed herself to be more than a ruler, more than a weapon. She allowed herself to be touched, not as a threat or a queen, but as someone who was capable of change. Daniel felt the weight of history pressing down on them. The war outside, the hatred, the council's anger, it did not matter here. Here, one simple act, one choice, had reshaped everything. She opened her eyes, and for the first time, her glowing gaze held something different. Not fury, not warning, Not command, but acknowledgement, acceptance. "You've done the impossible," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and disbelief. "You were to survive my warning, and you changed me." Daniel smiled softly. "Sometimes that's all it takes. One choice, one moment." The touch lingered, a silent promise in the quiet room. The human and the alien queen, enemies once separated by war and fear, had crossed the line no one dared to cross. And in that single act, the future of two worlds shifted forever. The corridors of the Everythi flagship were alive with whispers. The council had learned of the human's touch, the moment that should have been impossible, forbidden. The news spread like wildfire through the empire, igniting anger, fear, and disbelief. The alien queen, once untouchable, now stood exposed not only to her enemy, but to her own people. Her advisors whispered of weakness, of betrayal. Some demanded Daniel's execution immediately, claiming the queen had lost her judgment. Others questioned her rule entirely, saying a human had influenced her mind, tainted her authority. But she did not falter. She had expected threats, councils, and power struggles. What she had not expected was the quiet strength that Daniel brought, not through fear, not through violence, but simply through choice. When she entered the council chamber the next day, all eyes turned to her. Murmurs fell silent. Her scales, once glimmering with authority and untouchable fire, now carried a subtle warmth, a reflection of something she had not known in centuries. Change. "This human," she began, her voice steady and commanding, though softer than before, "is alive because he has shown me something none of you can." The council erupted in outrage. "You compromise your rule," one hissed. "Your throne is at risk." Her eyes burned, but her words held the weight of steel. "I am the ruler of this empire, and I decide who lives and dies. He is alive because he carries courage I have not seen in centuries. He reminds me that strength is not just power. It is also mercy. It is choice. It is endurance." Some counselors scoffed, but others froze, realizing the truth in her words. The empire had been ruled by fear for generations, crushing hope and humanity under its weight. And yet, here was a human, a fragile creature by their standards, who had done what no Everythi could. Daniel remained outside the chamber, standing silently as the queen spoke. He did not need to fight or argue. His presence alone had shifted the balance. The council's anger was loud, but it was scattered, unfocused. The queen's choice to protect him had changed the very rules of their world. In the following days, whispers of the touched human reached every ship, every outpost, every soldier. Morale among the Everythi faltered. Armies hesitated. Orders were questioned. They had been taught to fear humans, to see them as weak, but now they could not deny the courage and will Daniel had shown. The queen noticed subtle changes in herself as well. Her judgment softened. Her decisions became less rigid. Even in the council chamber, she felt a new strength, one not born from fear, but from understanding, from the realization that one simple act, a touch, a choice could ripple through the universe. One evening, she returned to Daniel's cell. He looked up as she entered, his heart steady but aware of the storm outside. "The council will not forgive this," she said quietly. "They will try to undermine me. They will call me weak." Daniel smiled gently. "Then let them. You've already done what matters. You've chosen to be human in a way they cannot understand." Her eyes softened, the faint glow dimming with a mix of relief and awe. "You've changed everything, human. Not just me, not just this ship. The empire itself may never be the same." He reached for her hand again, careful, reverent. This time there was no warning, no fear. She did not flinch. She allowed him to hold it, and in that small gesture the weight of centuries seemed to lift from her shoulders. Outside, the universe continued its chaos, wars raging and empires trembling. But inside the chamber, in the quiet space between two beings who had once been enemies, a new power had emerged. A power not of conquest, not of weapons, but of courage, mercy, and choice. The alien queen stood taller than ever, her presence commanding and undeniable. She had faced her council, faced her fears, and faced a human who had dared to touch her heart. And through it all, she realized that sometimes the smallest act, a touch, a decision, could reshape worlds and change the course of history. Daniel looked at her and whispered, "The rest of the galaxy will remember this. Not for the battles, but for what we did here." She nodded, a faint smile brushing her lips. Yes, human, they will remember. And perhaps finally they will understand what strength truly is. The war had ended, at least for now. The ships had returned, the fleets had withdrawn, and the cries of battle were replaced by cautious whispers of peace. Yet on the alien queen's flagship, another kind of transformation had taken place, one no one outside would ever fully understand. Daniel stood beside her in the observation chamber, gazing out at the distant stars. The lights of the galaxy stretched endlessly before them, and he felt both small and infinite at the same time. He had once been a prisoner, a mere human in a galaxy that had feared his kind. Now he stood as the human who had changed an empire, and beside him was the queen, the ruler who had learned the power of choice, courage, and trust. The queen's scaled hand brushed against his, not as a warning, not as a threat, but as something gentle, something deliberate. For centuries she had ruled through fear and strength alone, but now she felt something she had never allowed herself. Connection. You've done what no one else could, she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that had been absent for centuries. You touched me and I do not regret it, Daniel smiled. It wasn't about you or me. It was about what we could choose to be. And sometimes one choice changes everything. She looked at him, her eyes no longer blazing with molten fire but reflecting a softer glow. Something human, something alive. You've reminded me that strength is not just about dominance. It is also about compassion, courage, and hope. And perhaps that is why your kind endures. Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. The queen, once a being of untouchable power, now stood beside him as a partner, not a ruler, not a queen. And in that moment he realized humanity had proven itself, not with weapons, not with fleets, not with war, but with resilience, trust, and a willingness to reach out even when danger awaited. The council had been silenced, not by force but by the queen's choice. Her people began to see that the human was not a weakness but a mirror of their own potential, a reflection of courage and endurance they had long forgotten. Whispers of change spread through the empire, and slowly, the tides of fear began to shift. Daniel reached for her hand again, and this time she took it willingly, intertwining their fingers. The gesture carried weight beyond words. It spoke of trust, of understanding, and of the bond that had grown in the shadow of war and danger. The universe is not always kind, he said softly, but sometimes it gives us moments that matter more than anything else. Moments that can change history. The queen nodded, and we seized it together. For the first time, the room was quiet, not heavy with tension, but filled with possibility. Outside, stars burned bright, galaxies stretched endlessly, and the future of two worlds hung delicately in the balance. Yet within this chamber, all that mattered was the connection between one human and one alien queen. One choice, one touch, one moment had rewritten everything. She turned to him fully, her eyes reflecting both her strength and the vulnerability she had allowed herself to feel. You've shown me a truth I never knew I could embrace, that even the smallest gesture, mercy, courage, or trust can shape entire worlds. Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of his journey, of the battles, of the fear he had faced. Then let's make sure the worlds remember, not for the fights we won, but for what we became when we chose to be more. The queen's hand tightened around his. Yes, human, let them remember. Let them see what true strength is, not fear, not power, but the heart of those who dare to choose. As the stars stretched infinitely before them, a human and an alien queen stood side by side. One touch had shifted the balance of an empire. One bond had changed the course of history. And in the quiet of the galaxy, a truth became clear. Sometimes, the smallest acts, the simplest choices carried the greatest power, and humanity had proven itself once again. The human had touched the queen. The queen had allowed herself to be changed, and the galaxy would never be the same.